hearing, by the way, listeners, is that of Afra Raymond. It does speak, one, to the whole question of the Auditor General. It also speaks to the forensic audit that is being ordered. Now, you're saying it's not the first time it is done, but from what you have said thus far, what is in the available to us is with this forensic audit, it is not only a case of where, how much money was spent in this bailout, but who afforded preferential treatment to whom. Exactly. I mean, you are looking at, from the way I read it and from the way you state it, we are looking at some criminal charges that should come out of a forensic audit.
Yeah. Well, Rennie, we're on a very strong seam of the discussion here. Let me make my third point, and I'll come back to deal with the second one about why don't we know what the figures are. And my third point is this. When we reflect on the first one being that there's been repeated claims that there's an arrangement now in place to settle the situation at Mr. Duprey. And those claims have never been satisfied. When we look at that, what we are actually contemplating, I think, I don't have any proof, I'm putting something out there. What I think we are contemplating is a situation where, in fact, if I were in Mr. Duprey's position, and I'm not batting for Lawrence Duprey, I'm not supporting him, but I'm putting a point of view, I'm putting it in a certain way. If I was in Lawrence Duprey's position, and I had the government of Trinidad and Tobago coming to me and saying to me, sir, under this arrangement you signed on this date, you now owe us 24 or 25 or 26 billion dollars, and we want to sell this, and this to be able to recover the money. My first question to them would be, could you please give me details of how you got that figure? I want to see the details. I want to see all the details of all the payments. And in fact, any hesitation or stumbling on the part of the government would produce from me a scoff, and I would say, well, until you can give me details, there's no case for selling any of my things. And that loggerheads, that stalemate, I am wagering, that is the head of the needle the country is dancing on now. The pity in it, in terms of financial strategy, the pity in it, and again, the people who signed the original bailout have to explain why. The pity in it is that, in fact, we are not charging interest on that money, because every delay, if 3 years ago there had been a delay or 4 years ago there had been a delay, the expense would not be running to our account.
Yes.
But in a situation where asset prices are rising, inflation is rising and the value of money is falling, the public interest has been compromised by lending that large amount of money at zero interest.
Yes.
And the delays would have been accruing to our favor. Now, to come to the point, Rennie, so that's strategically where we are in terms of the negotiation, such as it was, or the discussions between the Duprey side and the state side. That's my view of it. I don't have any proof. That's my view of it. Now, the other thing is this. Let's talk about this question about who is owed money. What has started to become clearer and clearer to me, I had a discussion at my home 3-4 months ago about all of this. And some friends were saying at the time, it got pretty argumentative, and some friends were saying at the time that, in fact, they thought the amount of money that had been spent or that was really owed was in excess of 30 billion, maybe 35 billion. I was very skeptical. And I don't think they managed to prove their point. And I didn't agree with them. But a long discussion went on around that point. But you know what's interesting? Having slept on it for a few weeks I am more and more persuaded that there is something very, very strange with this total figure. Of course, this is the figure I litigated for. I want to know exactly how much was spent, all the details of all the payments, who got that money. And I'll tell you why I think it's funny. We started off with a bailout that was estimated to cost $5 billion.
Yes.
And the cost has always moved upwards, and now it's in the region of $24 billion is the latest figure. Carl Member told us that figure a few weeks ago. And how could it be 24 when in fact there are still policyholders and stakeholders and depositors who have not been paid?
That's right.
If we examine the statements of the very Minister of Finance, if we examine the statements of the very Lawrence Duprey, if we examine the statements in the public from the very claimants, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maraj is representing a large group of claimants. He was in the Privy Council a few weeks ago arguing. Mr. David Walker, my colleague, Ramesh is another colleague. Mr. David Walker, my colleague, has recently formed the group, the CLICO Stakeholders Alliance. They are representing claims in the billions.
Well,
if you have these live claims, which is not Mr. Imber and it's not Mr. Duprey talking, these are groups that are self-propelled.
Well, strangely,
to make these claims, what does it mean? It must mean that more than $25 billion is owed.
Strangely,
so
you sound as though you sound as though you
the size of the thing.
Sounds as though you're in concert, surprisingly, with Mr. Duprey in this area, because he says the successive governments who held him responsible for all this money they're talking about, they have produced nothing to support their claim. It seemed as though they have hidden all accounts from the public. He said every administration has gone into lengths to keep information from us, he says, fighting this all the way to the Privy Council. He says that something has to be done in clearing up this area. So in addition to the forensic, or maybe as a result of the forensic audits that we're going to see, we may find out who moved to have this information kept quiet.
We may, but such is the way of secrecy. It's like a spy movie.
You're not optimistic.
Like a spy movie. So you have a man in a reversible raincoat on a bridge in the rain, and he has a floppy hat. And he speaks with an accent that's not Trinidadian. And he answers in a code word. And it's like a spy movie to try to understand what is happening up in here.
We have to get to the bottom of this.
We really need to get to the bottom of this. This is our money.
We are sitting on these assets. As some people say, hey, it sounds as though a fire sale is going to take place. Some people say. And if you're going to sell assets on the cheap, you may never recover that kind of money you're looking for. And if you really have to deal with Mr. Duprey in a serious way, which is to decide what we're going to do. Because I do want to ask you this question. We need to find out these things. First of all,
yes.
What will it take, you believe, to acquire these shares that Mr. Duprey currently holds?
What would it take?
Yes.
Well, I mean, this sort of thing is not this kind of thing I would discuss on the air, to be quite frank, because we are really talking about the contest of a lifetime for the country. I mean, I would just put a hint out here, and I would make the point that you have had, and by you I'm referring to the CL Financial shareholders, Mr. Duprey and his cohort, I would say you've had 7 years of a free ride. You've had 7 years use of our money, with zero interest.
Yes.
And I would say, if we are approaching the table, and if we are approaching the table for a further extension to the shareholders agreement, which is due any time now, as it happens, because in fact the shareholders agreement was signed on the 12th of June 2009, today being the 12th of June 2016. So in fact, if you are approaching the table occupied by the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Central Bank for a refresher or renewal of that shareholders agreement, I would say you need to have it focused in your fine minds. What is the rate of interest you're going to be paying us? Because in the case of AIG, the interest rate that they paid was 3.85 times more than the base rate in America. The base rate in Trinidad and Tobago now is in the 7% region. Are you prepared to pay 3.85 times? Are you prepared to pay 2 times the base rate? What are you prepared to pay?
This is precisely why I started.
I'm going to use names. When Mr. Steve Bideshi, my acquaintance, lovely gentleman, very, very eminent banker, when Mr. Steve Bideshi was at Citibank, I don't believe Mr. Bideshi would have survived and had the high-ranking career he has enjoyed in Citibank if he had suggested to the city bankers lending people money, vast sums of money at zero interest. In fact, we all understand it's unacceptable and it's totally commercially untenable behavior. How could we be prolonging that kind of behavior in respect of the Trinidad and Tobago Treasury?
It is currently 25 minutes away from...
That is completely unacceptable. And I want to say more. I want to ask these eminent people. My dear friend, Dr. Brian Harry, is advising Mr. Duprey. Dr. Harry, what would you recommend is the correct rate of interest? Given the state of the Trinidad and Tobago Treasury and given the state that Mr. Duprey has had a 7-year free ride.